He didn't forget to lock the safe. He left it open on purpose. For a man like Amir al-Rashid, every decision was deliberate, every silence calculated. His life had taught him the hard way that trust was not a gift, it was a weakness. But even the most guarded men sometimes tested the walls they built, just to see if anyone could walk through without trying to tear them down. Amir was 43, one of the wealthiest men in Dubai, a city already overflowing with men who wore wealth like perfume. His empire stretched from glass towers to shipping ports, from luxury hotels to oil contracts negotiated in private chambers, where pens dripped more power than armies. The world knew him as the Falcon of finance, a visionary who had carved a dynasty from sand and ambition. But that was the world's picture. Behind the iron gates of his estate, Amir was something else entirely. The mansion stood on the outskirts of Dubai, a fortress of white marble and tinted glass. Palm trees lined the drive, their fronds whispering secrets to the desert wind. At night, the city's glittering skyline twinkled faintly in the distance. But here there was only silence. Silence, and the faint hum of security cameras. 26 of them, hidden in corners, perched above doors, watching every hallway. 3 panic alarms buried in the walls, biometric locks that responded only to Amir's touch. His world was a palace, but one built with suspicion for mortar. He hadn't always lived like this. Once, Amir had been a man who believed in people. He remembered his younger self, the one who laughed too loudly at dinner parties, who trusted too easily, who let the warmth of friendship and family blind him. That man was long gone. The betrayals had carved him hollow. The gardener he paid generously, treated like family, who sold confidential plans of the estate to a rival developer. The personal doctor he trusted with his life, who created fake medical reports and siphoned millions into Swiss accounts. Even his own brother, blood of his blood, who tried to have Amir declared mentally unfit so he could seize the family trust. Each betrayal was a blade, each smile a mask ripped away. And then came Samira. She had been the only true thing in his world. His wife, his anchor, his compass. She filled the mansion with saffron and oud, with wildflowers in vases, with laughter that melted even the sharp edges of Amir's temper. She reminded him to live, not just to count. But cancer came like a thief in the night, stealing her breath little by little, leaving Amir with silence where there once was song. When she was gone, the house changed. Chandeliers still sparkled, but the light was cold. The marble still shone, but it was sterile, empty. He never moved her things. Her library remained untouched, each book exactly where her hand had last placed it. That room became holy ground. Without Samira, the man who had once conquered empires shrank into routine. Coffee at 6, emails checked by 7, a silent breakfast in a dining hall that could seat 30, though no one sat across from him. Then long hours in his surveillance room, watching his own house like a warden, inspecting fruit deliveries as if they were poisoned, firing staff who dared to ask questions. Locals whispered about him. They called him eccentric, paranoid, dangerous. But Amir didn't care. Silence had never lied to him. Cameras never begged. Walls never betrayed. Yet even walls could not clean themselves. His health was faltering. The stress of years had etched deep lines across his face. His once powerful hands now trembled faintly, though he pretended not to notice. His body reminded him of what his mind refused to admit. He could no longer do everything alone. He needed help. With great reluctance, Amir called a staffing agency. His list of demands was longer than most resumes. No criminal record, no history of gossip, no small talk, no curiosity. Absolutely no questions. The agency sent him 3 profiles. The first was a young woman with a bright smile stretched so wide it felt like performance. Amir tossed it aside. The second was a man who had changed jobs too many times, whose desperation bled through every line of his history. Another toss. The third made him pause. Ayana Sula, 27 years old, slim, quiet, disciplined. Her work history was modest. Factory shifts, hospital cleaning, elderly care. No glamour, no noise. No trail of scandals or photos plastered across social media. Her file noted one phrase, "Driven by purpose, not profit." Amir scoffed when he read it. Purpose is a word agencies use to sell the unsellable. Yet something in her eyes, captured in that faded photo, made him stop. They weren't pleading, they weren't selling, they were simply steady. And so, on a blazing Tuesday morning, as the call to prayer drifted faintly across the city's skyline, Ayana stepped off a rattling bus and walked up the desert road toward the Al-Rashid gates. Amir watched through the cameras. She did not gawk at the towering walls or the fountains shaped like falcons rising from marble pools. She didn't even glance at the Bentley parked in the shade. She stood quietly, notebook in hand, her posture straight, her face calm. The gates opened. Inside the foyer, Ayana waited. She did not chatter nervously or paste on a false smile. She bowed her head slightly, hands folded. Her first words were not about pay, not about hours or time off. "The library," she said softly. "Should I dust the shelves only, or would you prefer the books arranged by subject?" Amir froze. No one had spoken of that room in years. The library belonged to Samira. It was her sanctuary. Her fingerprint left on every book, every note in the margins. He had not touched it since the day she was gone. "Dust only," Amir said at last. His voice was low, almost hoarse. "Everything stays exactly as it is." Ayana nodded. She wrote it down neatly in her notebook and asked no further questions. No probing, no curiosity, no forced chatter. For the first time in years, Amir felt something stir deep inside him. Not trust, not yet, but respect. Still, he buried it. No one entered Amir al-Rashid's life without being tested. The days that followed Ayana's arrival unfolded with an unsettling quiet. Amir studied her like a hawk. Not in her presence, of course, never directly. Instead, he lingered in his surveillance room, a chamber lit by the cold glow of 26 screens. Each camera offered a different angle: the courtyard, the hallways, the kitchen, the staircases. Every corner of his fortress was accounted for. There she was, Ayana, moving gracefully, silently, like a shadow that carried its own discipline. She dusted shelves without rushing, polished marble without complaint, and washed dishes as though she was scrubbing away her own reflections. Amir noticed the small things. She never lingered near expensive items. The jeweled vases from Morocco? She handled them carefully, but with the detachment of someone touching ordinary glass. The silver-framed photographs of business partners and royals? She wiped them clean, never pausing to study the faces. It was strange. Most people could not resist curiosity. Even the most professional employees stole glances at things beyond their reach. But Ayana seemed immune. Her focus was mechanical, almost meditative, and that made Amir restless. He had lived too long among masks and liars to believe in surface impressions. He knew greed could hide in silence. Ambition often dressed itself as humility. Everyone wanted something, he reminded himself. Some wanted money, others comfort, others opportunity. But what did Ayana want? That question gnawed at him until one evening, seated in his study, he devised a plan. The safe. It stood in the corner of his private office, behind a tall cabinet of ledgers. Black steel, thick as a vault door, with a digital keypad and a secondary biometric lock. Inside, Amir kept not just money, though there were stacks of it, neatly bound in bands, but also documents, property deeds, private letters, handwritten notes from Samira. That safe was more than security. It was his heart, sealed in metal. For years he had guarded it with religious precision. Every night he checked the lock 3 times, pressing his thumbprint until the screen glowed green, hearing the heavy click that reassured him. But that night, he did the unthinkable. He left it open. Not wide open, but slightly ajar, enough that any observant eye. Inside, the glow of the security light cast pale illumination on stacks of bills, dirhams, dollars, euros, all resting like bait in a hunter's trap. He stepped back and watched. Amir knew it was cruel, but cruelty was sometimes necessary. The world had taught him that trust must be earned, not given. If Ayanna was like the others, she would fail, and if she failed, he would not be caught off guard. Better to know her true self now than later, when the damage might be irreversible. Still, a sliver of him hesitated. As he walked back to the surveillance room, he thought of Samira. She had always told him, "Amir, suspicion poisons the soul. You cannot test every heart like a merchant tests gold." But suspicion had kept him alive. Suspicion had built his empire. And in this house, trust was not currency, it was risk. The cameras flickered. Ayanna appeared again, her figure small but deliberate as she moved through the hallway with a duster in one hand and a cloth in the other. Amir leaned forward, his fingers gripping the edge of the console. There it was, the office door. Ayanna paused before it. She knocked lightly, even though she had been told the office was hers to clean whenever needed. There was no answer. She pushed the door open slowly. The safe stood waiting. Amir's chest tightened. He could almost hear his own heartbeat over the low hum of the monitors. Ayanna stepped into the office. Her eyes scanned the room, as though tracing invisible lines. She moved to the desk first, dusting its edges, then toward the bookshelves, careful with each movement. Finally, her gaze drifted to the corner. The safe. Amir's throat went dry. Would she notice? Of course she would. The slight opening was obvious to anyone who entered. Her steps slowed. She tilted her head. For a moment, she froze. The camera zoom caught the subtle shift in her face. Confusion, recognition. She set her duster down on the desk and walked closer. Amir's hand hovered over the intercom button. A part of him almost wanted to storm in, to confront her in the act. But no, he would let the truth unfold. Ayanna crouched slightly, peering at the safe. She placed her hand on the edge of the steel door. Her fingers lingered, not pushing, not pulling, just resting there as if feeling the coldness of the metal. Seconds stretched like hours. Then, she drew her hand back. Amir's eyes narrowed. She didn't open it. She didn't touch the money inside. Instead, she picked up her duster again and gently wiped the outer surface of the safe, brushing away the thin film of dust that had gathered. She closed the door, not firmly, not suspiciously, but with the absent-minded care of someone closing a drawer. The lock did not click shut. She didn't try to engage it. She simply moved on, as though it was nothing more than another piece of furniture in the room. Amir leaned back slowly, his chest heavy with conflicting emotions. Was this restraint, or was it calculation? Perhaps she thought it unwise to take anything on her first chance. Perhaps she was waiting for a moment when no one would be watching. He rubbed his temples. Suspicion rose like smoke in his lungs. He couldn't celebrate yet, not until he was sure. That night, Amir lay awake in his vast, empty bed. The safe still haunted him. Ayanna's choice haunted him. Why hadn't she looked inside? Why hadn't she even asked about it? Most people would have. And in that haunting silence, Amir realized the game had only just begun. The next morning, Amir awoke before dawn, restless. The safe lingered in his thoughts like a half-closed wound. He padded across the cold marble floor, his silk robe brushing lightly against his ankles, and returned to the office. The door was exactly as he left it. The safe, slightly ajar, revealed the same neat stacks of bills inside. Nothing had moved. No handprints marred the dust. Ayanna had not touched it. He exhaled, long and low. For most men, this might have been enough proof. But Amir was not most men. He had been burned too many times, his empire scarred by betrayals that began with small, invisible cracks. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford, so he tightened the trap. That evening, he instructed his chauffeur and personal guard to take the night off. No extra staff, no interruptions. Only Ayanna remained in the house, tasked with evening cleaning. He retreated to his surveillance room, the glow of the monitors casting shadows across his sharp cheekbones. This time, he left not only the safe ajar, but placed a small envelope of cash directly on the desk, beside a crystal paperweight. Not much, 5,000 dirhams. Enough to tempt, enough to reveal. Hours ticked by. At last, Ayana appeared on the screen, entering the office once more. Her eyes caught the envelope immediately. Amir could see it in the subtle stiffening of her shoulders, the quick glance that lingered a heartbeat too long. She walked closer, set down her cleaning cloth, and picked up the envelope. Amir's chest tightened. This was it. Ayana held it delicately, weighing it between her fingers. Then, without opening it, she placed it neatly back where it had been and continued dusting the room. For 10 long minutes she cleaned, glancing at the envelope once more before leaving the office entirely. Amir sat in silence, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Why? Why wouldn't she take it? Did she suspect the cameras? Surely she knew he was watching. Or was she simply clever enough to play the long game, waiting until suspicion faded? The next day, he devised yet another test. In the grand dining hall, beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal, Amir arranged the table with a single golden tray. On it, he placed an emerald bracelet once belonging to Samira. It wasn't just expensive, it was irreplaceable. He left it there deliberately, then excused himself under the pretense of a business call, retreating once more to the shadows of his surveillance screens. Ayana entered with her usual quiet steps. She carried a silver bucket and rag, prepared to polish the table's surface. When her eyes landed on the bracelet, she froze. Amir leaned forward, every muscle in his body taut. Ayana set the bucket down, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the tray. For a moment, she simply looked at the bracelet, her eyes softening with something Amir couldn't quite decipher. Was it desire? Sadness? Memory? She did not put it on. She did not pocket it. Instead, she reached into her apron, pulled out her small notebook, and scribbled something quickly. Then she returned to cleaning, leaving the bracelet untouched. Later, when Amir confronted her indirectly, he asked what she had written. Ayana replied in her calm, measured tone, "Never clean the master's memories. Dust the table, not the keepsakes." The words struck Amir like a blow. Samira used to say something similar when servants hovered too close to her personal belongings. "Objects carry memory," she would tell him, "and memory deserves respect." For the first time in years, Amir felt his suspicions flicker. Could it be possible that Ayana wasn't like the rest? That she truly understood boundaries, not because of fear, but because of respect? Still, the cynic in him hissed. Or perhaps she is simply more patient than the others. Give her time. She will reveal herself. That night, sleep did not come easily. While the city of Dubai glittered in the distance, its towers like jeweled daggers piercing the desert sky, Amir lay awake staring at his ceiling. He thought of Ayana, of her steady eyes, of her notebook filled with careful observations, of her hands that treated his wealth not as temptation, but as dust to be wiped away. And for the first time since Samira's death, he wondered if suspicion had cost him more than betrayal ever had. But Ayana's world was far from simple. Though Amir did not know it, each evening when she returned to her modest apartment across the creek, Ayana carried with her more than exhaustion. She carried memories of Lagos, of nights when hunger gnawed at her siblings, of days she scrubbed hospital floors just to send money home. Every dirham she earned here was already spoken for. School fees for her younger brother, medicine for her aging mother, rent for her sister's children. Wealth dazzled her eyes, yes, but it did not own her heart. She had seen too much of life's cruelty to bow before it. Money could feed a child, but it could not mend a broken promise. Gold could decorate wrists, but it could not stop illness from taking a mother too soon. That was why, when she saw the safe ajar, when she saw envelopes of cash or glittering jewels, she reminded herself, not everything within reach is meant to be mine. Her dignity was the only inheritance she could never afford to lose. But Amir could not know that, not yet. To him, she remained a puzzle wrapped in silence, and puzzles were dangerous things. By the third test, Amir found himself in unfamiliar territory. He was no longer watching simply to catch her failure. He was watching to understand her. The difference was subtle, but it unsettled him. For years, suspicion had been his armor. Now, against all logic, he found himself hoping that she would remain unbroken, that she would be different. It was dangerous, this hope, because hope was the first crack in the walls he had built so carefully around his heart. The night after Ayana ignored the envelope of cash and the emerald bracelet, Amir did not sleep. He paced the surveillance room, screens glowing with the empty corridors of his mansion. He poured himself glass after glass of pomegranate juice, though the taste barely touched him. His mind circled Ayana like a hawk that had spotted a small creature moving in the sand. Was she prey, or was she the one thing that could not be caught? He could not decide. So, he designed a new test. This time it would not be money. Money was too obvious. Any clever maid could guess he was watching and resist taking a few bills. But something personal, something intimate, those were harder to resist. People could ignore cash when they knew they were being monitored. But curiosity? Curiosity was the most dangerous thief of all. At dawn, Amir unlocked the cedar chest in his private quarters. Inside were Samira's letters, written during their early years together. Her handwriting curled elegantly across thick ivory paper, smelling faintly of jasmine even after all these years. Each line carried pieces of him no one else knew. His insecurities, his hopes, the jokes he dared not share in public. These letters were his most vulnerable possessions, the last unbroken threads binding him to the woman who once softened every hard edge in his life. He had never shown them to another living soul, and that was precisely why he chose them. He placed the bundle of letters on his mahogany desk, beside a sapphire necklace Samira wore at their wedding. The safe door was left ajar again, not wide open this time, but just enough to reveal the corner of the jewelry case inside. The message was clear: treasure here, secrets here. Then Amir retreated into the surveillance room, cameras humming, pulse steady but eyes sharp. By mid-morning, Ayana entered the east wing. Her soft shoes barely made a sound against the marble floors. She carried her notebook, as always, tucked beneath her arm. When she reached the open door, she stopped. Amir leaned forward, so close his breath fogged the screen. Ayana glanced at the safe, then at the desk. Slowly, she stepped inside. She noticed the necklace first. Its sapphire caught the sunlight and spilled blue fire across the desk. Her eyes lingered, not with greed, but with something gentler. Then she saw the letters. Her breath caught. Amir could see it in the rise of her shoulders. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the corner of the top page. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a small sigh, she slid the letter back into place and clasped her hands tightly together. But temptation did not retreat. She circled the desk once, twice, as if pulled by invisible strings. Finally, she sat in the leather chair, her palms pressed flat on the polished wood. Her eyes never left the bundle of letters. Amir's throat went dry. This was the moment. Would she read? Would she pry into the only sanctuary of memory he had left? Ayana reached forward, then stopped again. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears shimmered there. Her lips moved in a whisper Amir couldn't hear. But when he read her mouth, he caught the words, "Not mine, not mine." And then she pushed the letters gently back, straightening the stack as though guarding their dignity. She rose, scribbled a note in her little book, and left the room without another glance. Amir sagged against his chair, emotions colliding inside him. Relief, disbelief, confusion, rage at his own relief. What if she was simply acting, knowing he would watch? What if all this was performance, carefully crafted to win his favor? He pressed his hands over his eyes and muttered into the silence, "No one is this pure." But the cameras had captured no hesitation, no slip of greed, only restraint. Ayana returned that evening to her small flat across Dubai Creek. She unlocked the thin wooden door and was greeted by the sound of her younger brother's voice over WhatsApp. His laughter through the phone was the one thing that made her shoebox apartment feel alive. She made herself a cup of tea, sat cross-legged on the thin mattress, and listened as her family filled her in on life back in Lagos. Her sister's children were growing fast. Her mother's health was unsteady. Her brother was studying hard. Every word carried weight. Every update carried a price tag. That night, after she said goodnight, she lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above her. She thought of the sapphire necklace, of the soft curves of handwriting she dared not read. She thought of how easy it would be, so easy, to take one piece, one jewel, one folded page, and trade it for relief that her family desperately needed. But her conscience held her still. She had grown up with little, but she had grown up with dignity. And dignity, she knew, was the one inheritance poverty could not strip away. Meanwhile, Amir's thoughts refused to settle. He found himself replaying the footage of her circling the desk, of her lips forming the words, "Not mine." He had never seen such restraint, not from business partners, not from friends, not from family, but he refused to believe just yet. The next morning, he raised the stakes again. This time, it was not just a necklace or a letter. This time, he would tempt her with salvation itself. In the safe, Amir stacked neat bundles of US dollars, 50,000 in total. He left the door wide open, the money spilling slightly from its edge, so visible no one could miss it. And then fate intervened. At precisely 10:03 a.m., as Ayana entered the East Wing, her phone buzzed. She froze in the hallway, glanced at the screen, and answered. Amir, watching from the surveillance room, unmuted the audio feed. It was Ayana's mother. Her voice shook with urgency. The grocery shop back home, the only income for the family, was on the verge of closing. A creditor was demanding repayment of $38,000 within days, or the shop would be seized. Ayana's breath hitched audibly. "Mama, where would we get that kind of money? That's impossible." Her mother's answer was simple, desperate. "You are in Dubai. You work for a man who has more than enough. Ayana, please, we will lose everything." Silence stretched long across the line. Amir watched her face as tears filled her eyes. He watched her grip the phone with both hands, as if holding it tighter would hold her mother's world together. He heard the faint tremor in her voice when she promised she would find a way. Then the call ended. Ayana turned slowly, and there it was, the open door, the safe brimming with salvation. Her breath came in short gasps. Her hands trembled. Amir could feel her pulse from across the mansion through the trembling of her shoulders on screen. She stepped closer. One bundle of cash, just one, would be enough to save her family. $50,000 sat waiting, indifferent, faceless. He would not even notice. To him, it was a pebble on the shore. To her, it was a lifeline. Her hand lifted, hovered in the air. Amir's chest constricted. His entire body leaned toward the screen. "Take it," he whispered under his breath, not in anger but in painful curiosity. "Show me your price." Ayana's fingers hovered a breath away from the crisp edges of the bills. Her lips quivered, and then, in a motion that startled even Amir, she slammed the safe shut. The echo of metal clanging against marble rang through the surveillance feed. Ayana collapsed into the chair beside it, head in her hands, sobbing. Amir's mouth fell open. His heart pounded with a rhythm he had not felt in years. She had locked salvation away with her own hands, and yet her tears told the truth. The choice had cost her more than he could measure. The silence of the East Wing was heavy, almost unbearable. Ayana sat slumped in the leather chair outside the safe room, her hands still trembling from the force with which she had slammed the heavy doors shut. Her breath came in uneven waves, her chest rising and falling as though each inhale was a war she barely won. She pressed her palms against her face, and hot tears seeped between her fingers. Her mind raced. The image of her mother's worried voice still clung to her ears, refusing to fade. $38,000. That was the price of her family's future. 38,000, a number that mocked her now, dancing in the air like cruel spirits. She could have reached out and solved it in seconds. The cash had been right there. Her fingers had brushed the cool steel frame of the safe. Her body had leaned forward as if to surrender. But in that moment, a voice louder than temptation roared in her heart. "Not mine. Not mine." The same mantra she had whispered days before when faced with Amir's letters. Now it returned, burning in her chest, fighting her desperation. But it hurt. It hurt so much she could barely breathe. Her sobs echoed faintly off the marble walls. She was not ashamed of the tears, They were proof of her humanity, proof of the sacrifice she had just made. She had chosen honor over survival, integrity over desperation. And yet, the weight of that decision pressed on her like a stone mountain. For 2 hours, Ayanna sat there, not moving, not cleaning, not working, just sitting beside the locked safe as if it were a wounded animal needing protection. Her eyes never strayed far from it, as though guarding against some invisible intruder who might undo the choice she had just made. Above her, hidden in the surveillance room, Amir al-Rashid watched every second. His eyes were fixed on the screen, unblinking, his fingertips pressed into the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. He had set traps before. He had seen people fail before. But he had never seen someone collapse into tears after resisting temptation. He had never seen someone lock away salvation and then suffer the cost of it in silence. This woman had broken the rules of the world as he knew it. For years, Amir's mantra had been simple: everyone has a price. He had lived by it, survived by it, rebuilt his empire on its harsh certainty. It had protected him from the pain of betrayal, because betrayal was inevitable. If everyone had a price, then betrayal was only business. But Ayanna had just proven something Amir had no room for, that some souls were not for sale. It frightened him, because if she was real, if her integrity was real, then his whole philosophy, his armor, was a lie. The room seemed smaller, hotter. Amir loosened the buttons of his shirt, but the air refused to cool. His throat ached, his eyes stung. He wanted to dismiss it, to tell himself she was clever, that this too was performance. But the footage was clear. Her sobs had not been performed. Her trembling, her collapse, her whispered prayers. None of it was staged. The walls around his heart, built stone by stone after Samira's death, cracked like fragile glass. Finally, as the sun sank into the desert horizon, Amir rose. For the first time in years, his steps felt uncalculated, unguarded. He descended the grand staircase, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat through the empty mansion. Ayanna heard him coming. She rose from the chair, wiping hastily at her cheeks, though her eyes were still red and swollen. She straightened her apron, but her composure was thin, as fragile as the edge of glass. Amir entered the hallway. His dark figure filled the doorway, tall, commanding, yet strangely unsteady. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a long moment neither spoke. "You're still here," Amir said at last, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Ayanna took a shaky breath. "I noticed the safe was open. I closed it. I stayed to make sure nothing happened." Amir nodded slowly. "I know." Confusion flickered across her face. "You know?" His eyes softened, though his tone remained firm. "I saw everything, the cameras." Ayanna froze. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together again. Her gaze dropped to the floor, disappointment flickering in her chest. "You were testing me," she said quietly. "Yes." Amir's voice carried no apology. "I needed to know who you are." Ayanna inhaled slowly, then lifted her chin. Her eyes, though weary, burned with steady fire. "This is your home. You have the right to protect it," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Amir studied her face, every detail etched into his mind. The exhaustion, the dignity, the quiet storm inside her. Then, without another word, Amir reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. He extended it toward her. She hesitated before taking it. With careful fingers, she opened it and found a check inside. $50,000. "This is yours," Amir said softly. "You earned it." Ayanna stared at the check. Her throat tightened. 50,000 was more than enough to save her family, to erase the debt hanging over her mother's head. It was salvation, placed neatly in her palm. But she closed the envelope slowly and extended it back to him. "I can't accept this," she whispered. Amir's brows furrowed. "Why not?" Because doing what is right isn't something to be bought or sold, Ayana replied. I did it because it wasn't mine. And if I take this, it would feel like I only resisted because I wanted a reward. Her words struck Amir harder than any betrayal ever had. For years, he had believed everyone had a price, and yet here she was refusing one. Why? He asked, voice breaking with genuine confusion. Why are you like this? Ayana hesitated. Her eyes glistened as memories surfaced. Years ago, she began softly. My cousin needed surgery. We couldn't afford it. My family begged, borrowed, sold what little we had. It still wasn't enough. And then, an anonymous donor paid for it, saved his life. We never knew who it was, but when I applied to work here, I recognized your name from the hospital's donor list. I knew it was you. Amir's heart stilled. He remembered that donation. He had signed the papers without much thought, just another act of charity among many he made in Samira's honor. He never imagined it would come back to him like this. That's why I came, Ayana continued. Not because of your wealth, not because of what I could take, but because I wanted to serve with gratitude, not greed. Her words tore through Amir's defenses like a blade through silk. For the first time in over a decade, his eyes burned with unshed tears. He turned away, pacing a few steps, his hands gripping the back of a chair for support. When he faced her again, his voice was softer, raw. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, what it means to trust, to believe in people. He walked slowly to his desk, opened a drawer, and retrieved a leather-bound folder. He returned to her, holding it out. This is the Winters Trust Foundation, he said. For years, I've searched for someone I could trust to lead it, someone who understands dignity, who cannot be bought. Until now, I found no one. I want you to run it. Ayana's eyes widened. Her hands trembled as she accepted the folder, staring at the embossed gold letters on the cover. I'm just a housekeeper, she whispered. Amir shook his head firmly. No, you are the only person who ever reminded me what it means to be human. That is worth more than wealth, more than blood, more than loyalty bought with contracts. Ayana's lips parted, but no words came. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. In that moment, the air in the mansion shifted. It no longer felt like a tomb. It felt alive, fragile, trembling with the possibility of trust reborn. Weeks later, the Winters Trust Foundation announced new leadership. Newspapers speculated endlessly. Who was this Ayana, the mysterious woman suddenly steering one of the most powerful philanthropic organizations in Dubai? Some called her unqualified, others called her chosen. But inside the mansion, neither Ayana nor Amir paid attention to the noise. She carried herself with quiet resolve. #Meta. Pause. Sex. 0.05. Drafting projects to rebuild schools, to support struggling families, to provide medical relief in places where hope had long been rationed. Amir watched from a distance, no longer through surveillance cameras, but in person, his trust cautious yet growing. And in those quiet moments when sunlight spilled through the mansion windows, he felt something he had thought forever lost: peace. For Ayana, the foundation was more than a job. It was proof that integrity had weight in the world, that resisting temptation had meaning beyond the pain it carried. For Amir, it was a chance to believe again. In the end, the safe had been left open as a trap. But what it truly opened was something far greater: a door to trust, dignity, and redemption. Because family, as both Ayana and Amir discovered, is not built by blood. It is built by trust. If this story moved you, don't just leave quietly. Hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who believes integrity is a lost value. Remind them it still lives. And before you go, subscribe to Shades of Truth and turn on the bell so you never miss another story that will change the way you see life. Now I'll ask you, if the safe was left open in front of you, what would you do? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the one we tell next.